What's up, y'all? This is Ace. This is Fantasized Football. I am the captain of the ship, the head honcho, and I am here today for the first of many times to bring y'all some fantasy football content. I hope you all enjoy. Let me get into what we're going to be talking about today. So, we're going to start off with 5 things that I'm really excited about for fantasy football 2021. This is going to be a 5-part series. I'm not going to do everything at once because the video is going to be way too long. But without further ado, let's get into my first point, and that's my boy, Allen Robinson. And more specifically, what's going to happen with Allen Robinson? Where will he go? Obviously, he's a free agent. He's going to have a lot of options. What could happen, things I like, things I don't like, what I expect from him, all the things of that nature coming up right now. So before we get into what's to come with Allen Robinson, we kind of got to look the past few years of what's gone on in his career. Obviously, a little earlier on in his career, there were some question marks with injuries, things that are like. But these past 2 years with the Bears, he's really proven himself to be one of the most elite wide receivers in the league. And that's why I love the guy so much. And he's criminally underrated. So with that out of the way, let's get into his stats from the past 2 years. In 19, he played all 16 games. He had 154 targets, 98 catches, 1,147 yards, 7 touchdowns. Now, last year, he had 16 games played, 2020, 151 targets, 102 catches, 1,250 yards, 6 touchdowns. Now, I'm not going to go over all this here, but I'm going to put some stats up on the screen, some breakdowns, catch rate, yards per game, catches per game, things of that nature, for those of you that care to take a look at. So now it's about time we get into kind of how I feel and what I'm thinking here. And what's on my mind is over the past couple of years, Allen Robinson's been a 150 target a year guy. Obviously, in a perfect world, he's going to stay in that range, 140, 150 targets. But I don't necessarily think that's something he needs in order to be a top-tier fantasy wide receiver. I think that in the right system with a good quarterback, he could thrive with just 120, 130 targets if he's going to be an 85 to 95 catch guy, be 1,100, 1,200 yards, and most importantly, be a 10-plus touchdown guy because those targets are going to be more valuable. So with that in mind, the scoring opportunities, the higher touchdowns is going to more than make up for the lack of, let's say, 10, 15 catches that he's going to be missing out on. Let's get into some potential landing spots, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, things of that nature here now. All right, so a selfish Miami fan, my perfect scenario is Deshaun Watson ends up in Miami, Allen Robinson ends up there too. Bing, bang, bop. We got the perfect combination. He's the number one, clear cut. He's got Deshaun Watson throwing him the ball. But realistically, that's probably not going to happen. I'm not really considering cap with a lot of this stuff because it's so early in the offseason and we're seeing like currently so many teams open up cap, moving things around to make things work. Anything can happen, but I doubt that will really be the case. One thing we can pretty safely assume is that in a perfect world, he's going to want to play for a contender. So that brings me to my first landing spot, which is Green Bay. I mean, you think about Green Bay, and one thing we've been saying for a while as a community is that they could really use a clear-cut, real number 2 receiver. In this case, it'd be more like a 1B to Devontae Adams 1A. But you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb type of situation. And obviously, I mean, it's more than likely that he wouldn't be getting 140, 150 targets playing with Devontae Adams in Green Bay. But we do know they're going to throw the ball a lot. We do know they're going to score a lot of touchdowns. They're going to be a good offense. They're going to be a good overall team. I mean, this is kind of like what we were just talking about. I could see him definitely being 120, 130 targets, 88, 95 catches, 1,100, 1,200 yards, and 10-plus touchdowns because those targets that are going to come from Aaron Rodgers is so much more valuable than the ones that are coming from Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles. I'm fine with the decrease in targets because it means that the targets he is going to get are going to be a lot more valuable and result in probably more touchdowns and more production overall. I think this is good for Green Bay. I think it's good for A-Rob. I think it's good for fantasy. I love this. This is probably my favorite spot overall. Now, we go from my favorite spot to one of the most polarizing spots. This is kind of weird. Sometimes I even ask myself if I even really like this, but I really think I do the more I think about it, and it's Baltimore. And the reason why I say I like Baltimore is, for one, he's going to be the clear-cut number one receiver there. You got Marquis Brown, you got Mark Andrews, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Allen Robinson would usurp both them on the depth chart and in the target share, things of that nature. But also because last year, Baltimore got real one-dimensional. I mean, I think they only threw the ball about 400 times last year. And in 2019, they threw it like somewhere in the mid-fives. I want to say like 550 times, somewhere right around there. So over the past few years, they're averaging like 470, 480 pass attempts per season. And I think that they'd be a lot better off being able to kind of go back to 2019 and be a little more versatile in their offense, because it felt like last year a lot of the time it was just on pass plays they would break down and it was just Lamar running the ball, or short pass to Mark Andrews, or go deep to Marquis Brown, or go deep to Mark Andrews, or whoever. And it just was like, it almost felt like teams that kind of figured them out a little bit. And at times Lamar was struggling because he couldn't just run because teams were expecting that. So I think adding a guy like Allen Robinson will do a lot of good for the Ravens, and it could for Allen Robinson too. I mean, let's start with just the Ravens, because what I think this does is having a guy like Allen Robinson, a receiver of his caliber, he's going to be able to get himself open. He's going to be able to stretch the field. He's going to be able to make plays for himself, and then what that's going to do is that's going to open up the field for Mark Andrews to get open and do his thing, and Marquis Brown to get open downfield, and Lamar to break out and run more often because you got the threat of Allen Robinson. And the person on the Ravens I think this benefits the most will probably be Marquis Brown. And you might think that's kind of counterintuitive, because obviously if Allen Robinson is there, he's probably not going to get as much targets, even if they do throw more, like I expect they would. When you add a receiver of the caliber of Allen Robinson, by default, you're going to want to get him involved, so you're going to throw the ball more. I don't think they would be a 600 pass attempt team, but I think they could be in that like 5 to 550 range, 520, 530 pass attempts for the year with him there, and that's fine. I mean, that's cool. But what this would do for Marquis Brown is, you got Allen Robinson going over the middle, getting himself open, making plays. The defense got to worry about that. Now you got to worry about Mark Andrews doing the same kind of thing. Then you got to worry about Lamar Jackson breaking it down with his legs. You got to worry about J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield, Gus Edwards out of the backfield. Now all of a sudden the focus is off of Marquis Brown. Marquis Brown can beat his dude. He can get downfield. He can get open. They can chuck to him. I don't think he would have as many targets, but I think the targets he would get would, again, be more valuable, because he's going to be in a lot more situations where he's not one of the focal points of the defense, so he's going to be able to get open. Another reason why I really like this is because I really think this is one of the scenarios where, if the circumstances go correctly, in the way I'm kind of saying, this could be a situation where he gets 150 plus targets, Allen Robinson that is, because like I said, say they're throwing the ball 520 times, right? Marquis Brown's not a guy that's going to be getting 100, 110 targets. He never has been. I mean, he's only been in the league 2 years, but he's kind of proven that he's the type of guy that can do a lot with a little. He only needs like 80, 90, 95 targets to really be successful. So if he's only getting, let's say 90 targets, and Mark Andrews is getting 100 targets, that's only 200 targets right there out of 520. That leaves 320 left over. I don't think it's insane to think that Allen Robinson could get 140 or 150 of those targets. You know what I mean? Because J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, neither of them are really pass-catching running backs. I mean, I think Dobbins has the potential to, but the Ravens haven't shown a tendency to really throw to the running backs that much. So I think he could get those 150 targets if everything goes right, and it would be beautiful if that was the case, and it would make the Ravens a lot better. They'd obviously be contenders. So I think it makes sense because I also obviously think that Lamar Jackson is a better passer than Trubisky or Foles. I'm still a little questionable about Lamar. I mean, his rookie year, he was really good. Last year, not so much. But I think that was more circumstantial than actually him. And I think if you gave him a real, true number one receiver like Allen Robinson, he could really shine. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this already. I think I did, but in case I didn't, let me just say I'm not very savvy with cap and money and all that stuff. But I do know from experience, from being a football fan and fantasy football and following off season and stuff, that the impossible becomes possible in a matter of hours, minutes, where a team has no cap space and then all of a sudden a few contracts are restructured, a few guys get released, and then all of a sudden anything can happen. So with that being said, don't crucify me over the if the money doesn't work right now, because you never know, anything could happen. But with that out of the way, my next spot is the Colts. And the Colts. Now, when I originally had thought up this idea, we didn't know who the Colts quarterback was going to be. And I was saying the biggest thing here is who's the quarterback. But now we know who the quarterback is, or at least we think we do, and that's Carson Wentz. And I guess this comes down to which Carson Wentz are we getting. Because Carson Wentz was great with Frank Reich. He was great. Last season he wasn't great. Wasn't great at all. He was really not good, actually. But if we get the Carson Wentz of old, that could be great. I'll touch on that a little more later. Let me explain why I like this landing spot when I originally came up with this. Obviously, we didn't know quarterback situation, but what I was kind of thinking is T.Y. Hilton's on his way out, right? So this is another situation where Allen Robinson comes in. He's the clear-cut number one. He's going to be the target leader on the team. He's going to have a great opportunity, right? The other reasons I like this is because I actually really like Allen Robinson. Not even just for fantasy football or just for as a player. I just like the guy. I do. And I don't know if that's because he's so undervalued and underrated, but I do. And I want to see him win. And I want to see him play in a good system with a good quarterback. And I'm not saying Carson Wentz is a good quarterback. I think Carson Wentz is a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he was at least. And I think last year was more of an outlier. But regardless, I think Wentz is better than Foles or Trubisky. Well, history would say Foles, maybe not. But Trubisky, yeah, and overall probably better than Foles realistically. But with that in mind, Allen Robinson comes in. He's the real number one. He is the guy there, and he's playing for a contender. And I love that. I love that he's playing for a contender, a team that could really be good. The Colts have a great defense, a top defense in the league. They have one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in the league. And I think that's huge, not only for Allen Robinson and playing for a contender, but back to Carson Wentz. That's big for Carson Wentz, too, playing with a really good offensive line, because Philly's offensive line was really banged up last year, and that was probably part of it. The last time we saw Carson Wentz with Frank Reich, he was having near MVP quality seasons. He was great. He really was. And then all of a sudden last year, switch flip. Frank Reich was gone. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's not. He wasn't the guy he used to be. And I'm hoping that 1 year didn't kill his confidence and kill his morale, and Frank Reich can bring that guy back out. Because if we have that Carson Wentz with Allen Robinson on this team, Allen Robinson comes in, right? He's got to fight with Michael Pittman, I like Pittman. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's going to really command targets. Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities here, like I had said, which would be a perfect scenario for him to get 150 targets. I mean, I've said it might not happen in some places, but this is one of the places where I can see it happening. Last year, they threw the ball 550 times, right? I would assume they're going to be around the same. They're going to be a balanced offense. Obviously, their defense is going to help them win a lot of games, so they're going to want to run the ball when they're winning big. But I think they'll stay competitive in a lot of games. They're going to throw the ball. They'll probably be around the same 550, 560, 540 pass attempts in that range. And with that in mind, I don't think that's 150 targets is out of the realm of possibilities there. I think that's probably likely for him. And if that's the case, and he's on a better team, right, the Colts are going to be better as long as Carson Wentz is an absolute bum. The Colts are going to be better than the Bears were last year. He's going to be on a better team with more scoring opportunities. So if he gets 150 targets, and even if he's just catching the same 100 balls, not even considering that his catch rate might be better with Wentz if Wentz is better. And if Wentz is the Wentz of old, then yeah, it's going to be. He could be 110, 115 catch guy, in that range with 1,300 yards, 1,350, 1,400 yards, and 10 plus touchdowns. And then all of a sudden, he might even be like top 3, maybe the wide receiver 1 overall. If he's catching 120 balls, 1,400 yards, and 12 touchdowns, he could be easily a top 3 wide receiver. I just think that if all goes right in this situation, this is another one like Baltimore that the upside is insane. This could really work. This would be great, but it's very reliant on Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz being the Carson Wentz of old and not the Carson Wentz of last year. And if Frank Reich can bring that back out into him, this is one of the spots that I really, really love as well. All right, and now we'll wrap up with something relatively boring, and that's what I honestly think could be the most likely scenario, and that's that Allen Robinson gets franchise tagged by the Bears and he gets brought back. I don't think they'll sign a long-term deal. Maybe they will. I mean, in the scenario that Deshaun Watson ends up on the Bears, this all of a sudden becomes my favorite spot. Right then and there. Done. It's done. Right there. If Deshaun Watson ends up on the Bears and Allen Robinson stays around and he's there long-term, I would do whatever it takes to get my hands on Allen Robinson in any format, because I think with Deshaun Watson at the helm, in a system where he's proven to be the alpha and they respect and want to use him like that, nothing could be better. But I don't think it's very likely that Deshaun Watson ends up on the Bears. If he does, great. In a scenario where he does get franchise tag and Deshaun Watson doesn't come around, I could see them franchise tagging him and trading him. I don't know exactly how that works, if it works similar to the NBA, where if you sign someone and then you trade them on the prospect of them re-signing with the team they're traded to on a long-term deal. I would assume that's how it would work. But say he just gets franchise tag and he sticks around another year. Again, we don't know what the Bears are going to do at quarterback, if they're going to bring back Trubisky, if, God forbid, Foles is the quarterback, or if they're going to draft or bring somebody in, whatever it is. But I don't think it could get much worse. And this is like kind of a safe area where the Colts and the Ravens are kind of risk-reward type of situations where it could be really good or it could be kind of This is a situation where I can feel pretty safe about things, because I think worst case scenario, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be at like pretty close to 150 targets, if not a little more, like he has been the past couple of years. Same kind of 95 to 105 catches in that range, and 1,200 yards. And probably 6 to 8 touchdowns, which again is fine. Like I'm not mad at that at all. That's a top 8-10 wide receiver, obviously in full PPR. So I'm okay with that as well. But I just don't see as much upside here as I do with some of the other situations without something drastic changing in Chicago with the quarterback situation. So if Trubisky is still around and it's Trubisky and Allen Robinson, just expect more of the same, and it's fine, and it's not bad, but there's just not as much excitement to it as there would be with like a Green Bay or a Baltimore or an Indy or even a Miami if Deshaun Watson ended up there. That would actually be my favorite scenario. It would be Miami, Allen Robinson, Deshaun Watson, just because I'm a Miami fan. And I think Miami's better than Chicago anyways. Like their defense is as good, if not better, and there's better weapons around there, and they have a lot of draft capital too for this season. So I'm assuming they're going to bring in a good running back too. So I just think it would be a better situation overall. But with all that in mind, that's pretty much the end of all the teams I've been thinking about and the scenarios I've been thinking about and whatnot. And I'd like to just finish off with this. I think that the best case scenario for Allen Robinson is he ends up in a place with a really good quarterback where he is the number one receiver and he can still get that 150 plus targets. Like I had said, like whether it's somewhere with Deshaun Watson or maybe with Lamar or Carson Wentz, but even if it's only 120, 130 targets and he's on a team like Green Bay or a situation like that where he's like a 1B type of play with a really good quarterback, I'm okay with that as well. But best case, he ends up in a better situation quarterback-wise, but the same situation as Chicago, kind of, if that makes sense, where he's still the top guy, the clear-cut top guy, getting 140, 150 targets. And just for an idea of what I kind of think his ceiling is in the right situation, I would say somewhere around 110 to 115 catches, 1350-ish, 1,400 yards, and 10-plus touchdowns. If everything goes right for him, he ends up in the right system, on a high-scoring offense, with the right guys around him. I think he can be really a top 3, top 5 receiver for fantasy football, especially PPR. So with that being said, that's it. That's all I got for y'all today. If you stuck around this long, thank you very much for doing so. I appreciate y'all. If you liked the video, hit it with a thumbs up. Subscribe. It's free. Just do it. Please. It'll really help the channel, man. Tell your friends. Tell your family. And keep on coming back, checking it out. Hit that bell. Let you know when there's more coming out. And I'll be back at y'all soon with part 2 of this series, which is the top 5 things I'm excited about for Fantasy Football 2021. Until then, have a great day, y'all. I love you. Double peace.